and welcome to this Ramblogue. This particular edition, Chris and I are taking a look at the Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut by Zack Snyder, and it's an interesting discussion because I was quite surprised to find we had quite a different perspective on the film, and it led to what I think was quite an interesting discussion. So yeah, this is actually a segment taken from our podcast, Nothing But Static. This segment is whole, but if you'd like to hear the rest of the podcast where we talk about some other things, including Superman and Lois on the CW, Clarice and Keenan, some new shows that are airing at the moment, then you can head over to wherever you get your podcasts basically and search Nothing But Static and it'll come straight up. But yeah, otherwise enjoy this discussion of the Snyder Cut.
This week's been all about the Snyder Cut anyway, with Marvel sort of jumping up and down going, Falcon and Winter Soldier's out Friday as well. But it's mainly been, and we'll talk about Falcon next time when there's 3 episodes. But yeah, yes. It's been mainly Snyder Cut, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So should we do it, Dan? Should we dive into the Snyder Cut?
Go on.
Why aren't you excited to talk about the Snyder Cut, Dan?
Well, I am and I'm not. Because the question just keeps coming back to, and everyone seems to be just right. So I'd say why this is frustrating me, this as a discussion, is no one is viewing this film as a film. They're all viewing it in comparison to the previous film. And while I understand that's natural, people need to be, in my opinion, a little bit more objective about their analysis. Because, in my opinion, neither film is better than the other. They are both...
Really?
Yes, they are both deeply flawed in completely different ways. Sure, okay, let's break it down. The Snyder Cut is fractionally more cohesive, but it is twice as long, and the math on that doesn't add up for me. To take up 4 hours of my time to make it fractionally more cohesive is not worth it. It's also full of Zack Snyder's usual embarrassing amount of slow-mo, his awful dialogue, scenes that go nowhere, really on-the-nose symbolism, and a bunch of extra shit that adds nothing to the story he's trying to tell that's there because he could, that would not have been there had this been a theatrical release, but we'll come back to that. It's so self-indulgent, it's painful, but... that's not to say that Whedon's version is good either. It's flawed in a very different way. So, in the way that this one is more cohesive than Whedon's is tighter, but then the problem is the tonal dissonance you get when you mix Whedon's sensibilities with Snyder's. They're such different filmmakers. That film is a tonal fucking car crash. Plus, actually trying to bring Snyder's bloated nonsense down to 2 hours was too much to ask without the seams showing. So the editing it's choppy and you can tell stuff's been reshot and mustache gate and all that stuff. So I reckon there's potentially a good-ish 3-hour movie somewhere in all this footage, but neither director has done that. Neither.
Yeah, because for me, it's more than a fractionally better. I think it is a lot better. There are elements of it that I loved, and we can talk about the reasons I think it's better. But where I do agree with you is I think and it's hard not to, and in a way, I'm almost glad we're kind of getting it out of the way first, and then talking about the actual thing, because it's hard not to discuss the discussion when discussing this film. And I do agree that people, because there's an element of course it's better, it's twice as long. I would love to sit down and watch a 6-hour version of other movies, like for example, not to do the obvious comparison, but like Endgame, because I'd like to see Hulk becoming Smart Hulk explored more. I'd like to see Ronin explored more. He gets the opportunity to do this with this because it's half as long. But a lot of people are talking about how this is what should have got into cinemas and they should have, let him have his vision and all of that kind of stuff. This is never what would have gone into cinemas. They wouldn't have, even taking out, because as you said, there's also a load of extra stuff which he hadn't filmed at the time that he's added, and we will come back to that.
It was never going to be this. Ever.
No, and also, it's not even the 2-part thing. I've gone and checked. In June 2016, Snyder came out and said it's no longer a part 1 and part 2. what we're making is one movie. And then he didn't leave the project until May 2017. So this isn't the original conceit of part 1 and part 2 either. This is him, and fair play to him, and fair play to the fans, and I'm pleased for him, I'm pleased for the fans. I think it's great he's been given a chance to go, this is my ultimate vision, this is my 4-hour epic, that if I could do anything, and I've been given the opportunity to do that, and I'm really pleased he's been given the opportunity to do that, here is what I would do. But I don't think it's quite fair to then compare it against what had to be a 2-hour movie bringing the seams together, and compare the two and act as if this is what would have aired, this is what would have gone into cinemas, because this isn't what it would have gone into cinemas, and a lot of the discussion is around that. And also, I can, before I give my compliments, I can see why some choices, which will come to them, are like, you could have made more of an effort to keep that in. But some choices, take, for example, a really big one for me, is Barry out. Oh, but we're doing spoilers. We're doing a spoiler review, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the story thrust is the same. For those listening, I'm just sorry to disappoint you on this. It's not a completely different movie. It's the same movie, but with a more cohesive version of the plot, like where it doesn't feel like it's been chopped up. That's what this is. It's not the story thrust for all the people that were like, it's going to be so different. It's really not. It's the same movie.
Yeah, if you were to write down a paragraph description of the film,
of the plot,
and didn't necessarily go into character detail, but talked about the plot, you'd write the same synopsis, apart from the end scene, which we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. So Barry Allen saving Iris West is a great scene. It's a really good way of introducing Barry Allen. It's a good way of setting up that he's been using these powers for a while. It's a nice Easter egg thing that it's Iris West. It's really cool. Can I see why that got cut from the 2017, 8, whatever year it did come out, from the theatrical cut? Yes, I can see why that got cut, because it doesn't necessarily play into the rest of the film. So it's a good example of having it in there makes it better, but I do understand why that got cut. This is what frustrates me, though.
It doesn't. What does it do? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do it. Tell us anything about Barry we don't get from any other scene. It's absolutely self-indulgent twaddle. It's Barry Allen doing a cool thing. Look, it's all slow-mo and there's glass everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, visually that looks impressive. But you're telling me nothing about the characters. This is one of the most shallow movies I've ever seen. How do you spend 4 hours taking apart these characters, and tell me nothing new about them? Nothing. It's embarrassing how much this is one of the most inefficient movies I've ever seen. It does absolutely nothing in depth at all. It is his usual shallow twaddle with all this overt symbolism that tells me nothing about them. What are we learning about these characters beyond their physical backstories? I guess the only character that does get a little bit more, I think, that actually earns it is Cyborg. But that's because of the relationship with his father. But other than that, all the stuff that's added gives me nothing new.
Well, for me, but it's not even. Well, okay. So for me, the new thing with the Flash, or the different, because I think for me there are 4 characters that are interpreted differently in this, and for the better, which is Steppenwolf, the Flash, Cyborg, and Batman. With the Flash, I think it's about how in the theatrical cut it becomes, the save one person. The Flash doesn't really know what he's doing. The Flash is nervous, etc. Whereas having him save Iris West early shows that in this cut he has been saving people. He is more of a superhero whilst he's a loner. The fact that he's going for the job with the job walking shows that he's sort of meandering, which links better into the scenes that we get later with his father when he gets an actual job.
That's all covered in the other scenes that were in the original movie. Like his dad talks about it in the prison scene in the original cut. I watched the original cut about a month back. That's covered.
Yeah, but I think it's given more depth here by having that. Again, do I think needed? But I do think those 4 characters for me are handled.
I think the word depth never goes anywhere near this movie. Genuinely,
I think that's your opinion, but I think there is some depth here. Like, so for example, well, obviously you've named it. You can't deny there's more depth in Cyborg.
Yeah, Cyborg was the exception I made when I did say, like, with the exception of Cyborg, because of the relationship with his father and the way that ties into the overall plot. That stuff's good, solid. Like, I like the way that plays out, and I enjoy. I must admit, of the things I liked most of the changes, the Cyborg one was the reason I was like, there's a good 3-hour movie in here. You put the Cyborg stuff back in, basically, and lop off that fucking extra ending stuff.
We'll talk about the ending, but yeah, completely. And by the ending, by the way, yeah, just to be very clear, I don't know what your thoughts are of the climactic battle, but when I say the ending, I mean the epilogue nightmare scene, which we'll come back to, because the actual climactic battle I think is brilliant, and I think Flash there as well. I think the things where I was like, because even something like, so the Amazons scene, and getting more of that fight and doing things like having the building collapse and then the way Steppenwolf just rises from it makes Steppenwolf cooler, because he seems tougher, and that whole, and the Amazons also seem tough like that. It's one of those things where, again, that's a cut where I'm like, great, that works better for me. The Amazon scene, Amazons v Steppenwolf, works better for me in this cut. I understand why not all...
Sorry, I would say all the action scenes that gain time are better for it.
Yeah, but can I see why they were cut? Yeah, it's a shame, but I understand it, like the Amazons thing. However, Cyborg at the end and his role at the end in the climactic battle, and the Flash, his role at the end, which again is another reason why I think the Flash is enhanced, because fuck me, even if it's just for the wicked visuals of turning back time and running towards it, and him kind of going, no, I can do this, I can be the hero, and learning that and achieving that, how they didn't try and find more of a way to make the stuff at the end, that last hour in particular, not the nightmare scene, was where I was feeling more like, okay, everything so far, I can understand the decision, but cut. It's bold. Maybe it was something you didn't want to do because Wonder Woman had just made all the money in the world. Cut the Wonder Woman introduction to fit in some of that Cyborg and Flash stuff, because especially their role at the end was fantastic.
But you wouldn't have to cut anything from that original cut. I think this is potentially studio meddling, because essentially when you have a movie like Justice League, right, and you want to put it in cinemas, the shorter it is, the more showings you get a day, right? And if you're worried that all of the behind the scenes turmoil is affecting your bottom line, if you've just, say, for example, released Batman versus Superman to generally bad reviews and way less money than a movie titled Batman vs Superman should have made, what do you do as Warner Brothers? You go, well, we got to find some way to maximize this, right? And I feel like some of the conditions they brought Joss in under were make it lighter, make it funnier, and gut it so it's 2 hours. Because I feel
completely.
I feel like recent questions and assertions about Joss Whedon aside for a second, I think a writer as capable as Joss Whedon has been in media in the past would have looked at this movie, at what was shot, and probably done a 3-hour version of the tale. Like, I think even he probably understood that it was a tall task to bring it down to 2 hours, because it is a story that needs a bit more room than that. It's a story that's given too much room in this cut, which is again why it's like, I feel like fucking Goldilocks. Like, yeah, this cut's too short, this cut's too long. Like, at some point there'll be a cut that's just right, and I'll love it.
So people will attempt it. They must, because I'm not even an editor, and I'm sat there going, I'd just love to experiment, just see if it could be. If it could be done.
I think there is a genuinely like tight cut in there. So I agree with you. I think that there's stuff that you're constantly going like, I see why that was cut. I see why that was cut. But there's stuff that you go like, that's a shame that got cut. And I'm going to point out the action scenes. I think the action scenes. I remember when I watched the Joss Whedon cut recently, thinking these action scenes are pretty good. These are just probably Snyder's, right? Snyder's good at action. That's he's a visual filmmaker, right? He's a terrible storyteller when it comes to like developing like anything beyond really shallow concepts and characters, but he's visually a very, very talented filmmaker, right? Stick him with a good writer, and he's a like he'd be a really, really effective director. The action scenes look great. Even in the Whedon version, where it was clear Snyder had shot a lot of the action, and that turned out to be true as of watching this cut, by the way, because a lot of the stuff is in there. But it's all just tightened, and it loses a lot of the cat and mouse, the back and forth, which actually makes the action scenes quite exciting. The sort completely. Of the relay race vision of the escape the escape with the mother box with the Amazons. That's really cool, and with the extra beat the extra beat or two in the middle of that fight, because the Whedon version, and this is what happens with a lot of Whedon's versions of these fights, have the opening part of the fight and the end part of the fight, and skip a chunk in the middle, right? That's how Whedon kind of cut them, because the way a fight starts, you kind of can't change that, and the way a fight ends, you kind of can't change that, but you can sort of trim out the fat of the middle of the fight. But I think that's what makes it tense and what makes it good, and I think the same thing is true of the end fight, where the Whedon version chopped out a bunch of that, and I must admit, like, way better in this longer version.
Way, but it's for me that was the biggest, like, almost fist pump of like, oh, because things like Superman's reappearance, I went woohoo! Like, that really worked for me. I don't quite like the dialogue, like, not good enough or whatever he says.
The dialogue, man, come on, like, the dialogue is all over the place. There are a couple of good lines. My favourite line, I actually was so sure. One of my favourite lines from the first movie, the first version of the movie, I was so sure was going to be gone because I was convinced it was Whedon, and it wasn't. It was Snyder, and I was very like, woo, all right, cool. Which is the Flash Batman exchange of, what's your superpower again? I'm rich. Which is
that was very good. Yeah, I'd have if I had to guess between the two. But in general, that, because you got it, like, it's so much better than the family stuff, aesthetically, and also
I understand the thinking with the family stuff, which is Whedon's. Like, when you've watched the Avengers movies, you realize Whedon has a real impulse to show people who are being helped and saved by the heroes. He doesn't want it to feel. And the impulse is correct. The execution was not. The one thing that is weird about these films is it almost sometimes feels like they're defending a planet no one else lives on. Like, this Justice League film, there is an element of, who are they saving here? There's no humans around ever beyond these heroes.
I'll take that for something feeling so different, because whilst we've got, parademons, and we've got them fighting them to get into there, and we've got, Batman shooting down the parademons on the outside, the notion of, like, real time with heroes at points getting their asses kicked. I know we have, like, the Trinity v Thanos and stuff in Endgame, but and especially as this film was coming out before then, it really did feel different to what we've seen before, whereas the family and some other elements of the theatrical cut made that fight feel similar to what we've seen before. Mm-hmm. So I think that climatic battle is, and also fundamentally, Flash and Cyborg's role in it is like you say, I blame studio meddling. I absolutely agree that it felt like they went, Batman v Superman was too long, this needs to be 2 hours.
Well, yeah, but that's for a bottom line. It's not even for quality. That would have just been purely, we can at least recoup some of our costs if we can cram more showings in a single day. Because people often forget this with a cinema release. The standard is 4 showings a single day in a screen. If you're in that screen and you're 4 hours long, you're getting in 2, maybe 3 showings a day if you do it at awkward times. You just can't release a 4-hour, or even a 3-hour movie becomes tricky to fit in. 4 times a day. So yeah, it would make it a 2-hour movie. You can have 4, maybe if you start early enough, 5 screenings in a day, and that's just going to maximize the amount of tickets you can have on sale and the amount of profit you can potentially get. So it won't have even been that the studio felt creatively it's too long. It'll purely have been this is a money hole that we're worried we're sinking into. Save it, please.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So I know we touched on it, but I want to, in case people are like, you listed 4. So Cyborg we talked about, but just the father stuff is brilliant. The backstory is brilliant. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously taking all the Joss Ray stuff aside, just on a pure. Oh, fuck, you can see why Ray Fisher was annoyed.
Yeah, his
like
character gets the
level.
the most to do. His character gets, the only real arc. I think that's the other thing. There's no character arcs in this movie. They all just sort of are what they are the whole way through. That you could argue a tiny bit of flashes like, he gets a bit more self-confidence at the end, but it's thin, so thin. And in a movie that has 4 hours, much of that runtime dedicated to that character, the fact that that's as good as a character arc as he gets is a little embarrassing. But Cyborg definitely gets the best work here. It is heartbreaking for Ray Fisher to think he read this script, saw that he was basically, and rather ironically, the heart of the film, in a very real sense, and then to just be the trimmable thing. That's unfortunate.
And more work should have been done, I think, to not do that, to keep
2.5 hours would have been fine, and you'd have been able to keep that.
Yeah.
Josh should have fought for that. If the studio wanted 2 hours, he should have fought more for that, I think.
A 2.5 hour version of this movie as well, not with the reshoots. Because a lot of the jokes and stuff that were added, now that like we say, there's a lot of decent jokes in this that were already in there.
Yeah, that's
some of the cornier stuff added, and some of the little things like I prefer, the Lois meeting Clark of it all in this cut, rather than like Batman's phoned Lois up and she gets out of the car, etc. Going back to Steppenwolf, I think is more evolved in this. You get more of his reasoning for it. He seems like more of a threat. Still very CGI heavy, but you kind of understand why he's doing it a bit more and feels like more of a force. And Joss's version, obviously, it's a theatrical cut. Batman, I think, is treated better in this because it felt like now on reflection, now we really know the differences, it felt like they were trying to rush to Batman, who doesn't appear in this, like the Batsuit doesn't appear for a good while in this.
Yeah, I noted that down, Chris. Can I point that out? I wrote that down. Batman doesn't appear suited up till 1 hour and 50 minutes into this movie. At that point in the theatrical cut, we were watching the credits.
Yeah, and that scene in the awful parademon, this is how he finds out about Mother Box's exposition scene, like it's not good. And I really love in this that we really are experiencing an older, worn down Batman who sometimes isn't even in, like, he's in the fight, and it's a really good balance of how does Batman fight with these gods? And I think that take on it, and that take of it used to be me, but now I need a team, and we need people that are strong, and I'm almost not afraid. There's not a lot of ego with it with Bruce Wayne. It's more about Bruce Wayne than Batman, I think, and I much prefer that interpretation of it, and but the fact that's fleshed out.
It's at odds with the previous movie, though.
What, with Batman v Superman?
Yeah, it's completely at odds with the version of Batman we got in that movie.
But maybe that's what he's learned by Superman's death.
Maybe, but it'd be nice to tackle that in the movie. Maybe some sort of plot or character arc. I mean, what do I know? Character arcs. I miss characters. I miss not watching an hour of movie and going, what's actually happened so far? Nothing.
You were really this isn't an arc thing, but you were really excited. You messaged. We texted the day before it aired,
yeah.
And you said, I just want Martian Manhunter.
Yeah.
That's all I want, and I'm happy. I have no real ties to Martian Manhunter as a character. Didn't really know who it is. Don't know what that story is. Not really aware of it. So with the Martian Manhunter stuff, I was just like, cool. That's a fun idea. I loved the Lois Clark's mum scene.
Yeah, but it doesn't need that
But you
tag.
how did you feel about that?
No, it's completely pointless. But basically what's happened is Martian Manhunter wasn't in that movie, ever, in its initial conceit. It's very clear that's been added. But the plan ultimately was for that actor who played the general in Man of Steel to have secretly been Martian Manhunter the whole time. Right, that's the idea, and they were going to reveal that in a future movie, maybe the very next one after this. The sort of second Justice League movie, and because also all the promo for this was Unite the Seven, Unite the Seven, Unite the Seven, and everyone kept going, "Oh, who's the seventh?" Because there's 6 of them, and it turns out no one. That marketing was very strange. So he was never in this movie. But because this is Zack's last hurrah, he has shoehorned him in possibly the worst and most embarrassing ways you could, by making a scene that previously wasn't written with the intent of it being secretly Martian Manhunter, just having a character randomly turn into Martian Manhunter, and it was me, and then having him show up at the end to be all like, there's a threat coming, or whatever bullshit he spouts. Terrible, awful. I thought the CGI looked bad. On him, which is a shame. I didn't like the design, also a shame. I guess kind of comic book accurate, but not even really that. But just the facial movements, really, it was very uncanny valley. And also just utterly pointless. When I said I wanted Martian Manhunter, in my head, when the movie was shot, Martian Manhunter was involved in either the original fight with Steppenwolf and Darkseid from back in the day, like the Green Lantern was, and the idea being he's been on Earth for quite a long time in disguise, or I wanted him to show up in the final fight. I'm on Earth, I've seen this shit going down, I can't stand by any longer, and that Joss had cut him. The idea being that he'd always been, because again, I just had this Unite the Seven thing in my head, and I was just like, I thought there was one more hero that Joss had cut, because the marketing obviously shifted once Joss took over. So
yeah, because it is a bit like, well, if you're there, what are you in that final battle? Do you not feel the need to jump in, to give him a hand?
Yeah, and that's because so there are 6 heroes, so I don't understand even now what that marketing was about. I mean, he technically does appear in the movie, but it's not what I wanted. I mean, and again, when you've got 4 hours, I'm sorry, when you've got a 4-hour movie, there was a better way to integrate him into this. Maybe not without extensive reshoots, so that's fine. But if he wasn't part of the original 4-hour vision, then don't force him back in. The same with the Joker in that final scene. I'm very sad about his essentially mistreatment. I guess if they get a sequel, Martian Manhunter might get the cyborg treatment and have some heart at the center of his sort of story, maybe. But and also, I'm sorry, but just from a sheer movie making perspective, as an isolated piece of media, having Lois have a really heartfelt conversation with Clark's mother, and then she just turns into an alien, and then turns into the General from Man of Steel.
Oh, I didn't mind that, because I quite liked the world needs you too, Lois. I liked
I like the scene. Why would she just turn into a fucking alien straight afterwards? I can't imagine any audience member not familiar with the source material being it's just so random. It's just so strange. It doesn't add anything to that scene. That scene is lovely. Why would you ruin it with that?
No, but I like what the Martian Manhunter saying, because he's as the alien, as Martian Manhunter, he says the world needs you too, Lois. So but wouldn't that have been nicer coming from Martha? The idea that,
wouldn't that have been nice coming from Martha?
Yeah, maybe.
Why did that need to come from him? It didn't, and I don't think it was him in the original script. Weird, so weird. Such an odd choice. And it's full of that, and again, it is one of the most inefficient movies I've ever watched. I cannot express to you how little is done with the time it has. It's an hour of my life at least was wasted when I sat and watched this movie.
Yeah, well, I don't
long, dragged out slow-mo shots with music set to them. Oh, give me a slow-mo barking dog. Mwah, yeah.
The one that got me with there, the one where I'm absolutely with you on that, is the scene in particular where I am is Aquaman's slow walk to the water,
while they sing.
Yeah,
fuck me.
He just slowly gets engulfed by the water, and then it cuts to him in the water, and it's just a different like style, and it just jarred a little.
Well, let's
Sort of like, we don't need that.
Yeah, let's look at that example though. I mean, so the one thing that I do think is better about this movie than the original cut. I mean, again, some elements are better, some elements are worse. It just flits back and forth. One thing I do like better is that this version of the movie makes the premise of uniting the different tribes of Earth as one to fight off the Force. And originally it was the Themyscirans with the fish people, the Atlanteans, with the tribes of man, and they all gathered together with a Green Lantern from space and some other help, and they all went. So the idea that there's a Kryptonian, an Atlantean, someone from Themyscira, like all gathered together to fight, and it echoes that, and I think that's a really neat idea. I'm on board with that, and I do think that's clearer in this version, because another fight scene that was extended to this movie's benefit is the flashback fight scene.
The flashback, yeah.
That scene has a lot more context given to it. And while
Yeah, completely.
that doesn't add a whole lot to any of the actual characters, but it does give us more context. But the thing is, does that... Okay, here's my question then, looking at that. I think that does add more to it, because I think that does make the scene at the end when they're all united on the hilltop, cheesy as it is, in slow-mo, smiling at each other. Because you know what, I do something good, Chris. I like to stand on the top of a hill, look out over the rolling hills, and just laugh with my friends in a line. We all stand in a line and have a laugh.
It's the angle for me. I'm like, I know the symbolism of like heroes towering above us, but I think it was a little too low, the shot for me. Like the cinematography of that scene. That's a bit like, move the camera up a little bit. Like,
yeah. But I do also understand getting rid of all of the nonsense. Like, so, okay. I think it's good to know that Steppenwolf is working for someone that he is displeased, right? And you get that from the scene where he talks to, I forget the name of the character, one of Darkseid's minions, the guy, sort of his right-hand guy. I forget his name off the top of my head. It's not Granny Goodness, it's the other one. So he's talking to him, and it becomes clear that Steppenwolf is making amends for a previous fuck-up coming here, and it gives Steppenwolf a personal motivation to succeed on Earth, right? But beyond that, all the other Darkseid convoluted backstory stuff adds very little, other than here's a bunch of convoluted nonsense.
well, I think for me it was good setup. That's where I don't mind, because we've been teasing it. We will talk about the nightmare sequence, but that's where, because that was clearly originally planned.
Yes, right. That is correct. Yes.
And so for me, it got me in the right way quite excited for what could have been next. And, especially when he's like, ready the armies, and you see that shot and you think, shit, if they struggled that much with just that portion of what they were facing, what are they going to do if it's the equivalent force that we've seen in the flashbacks? There is still fundamentally only 6 of them at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was quite good setup. And again, I suppose Steppenwolf cowering to him, like you said, it makes that character more interesting as well. Mm-hmm. And so...
it does improve Steppenwolf. But there's just a part of me that I guess you're right though. It's in the context of this version where I know there isn't a sequel. I'm like, you can cut that because it's not relevant to this movie, and you ain't making the fucking sequel.
But I think so. Yeah, so with that,
but I guess in terms of preserving the original vision, that makes sense.
Yes, because that was there. So I've got a quote here. So let's talk about your new ending, because this is a deadline to Snyder, because it looks like you've set up for more. Frankly, the reason I did that was because the ask was for the purest version of the movie, and so that's what I was planning. All those years ago was this epic Lord of the Rings trilogy. Starting with this movie, I wanted to be the true sort of structure. I wanted to be true to the sort of structure that we were creating, and the sort of look that we had been creating. Even if there's never another movie, it just felt in genre and in the tone to really have this kind of bigger sort of cliffhanger look at the very end. It just made sense to me. But I just think... But you chose to film and add that, and it just feels like
It's extraneous because it doesn't add anything. So the stuff I'm talking about is the threat of Darkseid and the threat of the thing, and that stuff is there regardless of that final nightmare scene.
Yeah, and adds. Yeah. That adds to the movie. Adds to what it would have been. It feels a little bit like...
One of my favourite moments in this entire cut, Chris, is the way they kill Steppenwolf and his head goes through the fucking portal and lands at the feet of Darkseid. That is the most badass thing I have ever fucking seen.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And again, direct comparison, so much better than how he gets killed in the theatrical cut.
Absolutely,
Jesus.
100%.
The parademons attack him because they smell fear. Nope.
Yeah, again, with many of the choices in that original thing, I understand the impulse. I understand where it's coming from when you've had to cut Darkseid out of the movie and you want to find a way to kill him that feels clever, but also doesn't require you to shoot much more footage because you're on a very tight budget. But fuck me, yeah.
The Darkseid stuff, I really like for what it does to Steppenwolf, and I think it does do what the quote that I've just read is. It's him being true to his original vision. This is what you were going to get. For me, the nightmare thing
is where it goes over
just
the
like,
top.
But it's just a bit of a cock tease, because if you're saying you're not going to make that movie, why put it in and get people riled up and
I think the nightmare scene is worse than that, Chris, because I think the nightmare scene is self-indulgent because it doesn't help tell that story at all. It doesn't even help tell the story of Nightmare. It's just an excuse to put the Joker and Batman together. That's all that scene is.
It's the way I described it yesterday. It's a This Is Us flash forward, except instead of why is Nikki wearing a wedding ring, it's why is the Joker talking about giving Batman a reach around. It's and don't get me wrong, I don't think, just me personally, it's just my personal view, I don't think it's the best Batman Joker scene we've ever had on film, which is what a lot of people are saying. I would go as far as say it's one of the worst Joker scenes we've ever had committed to film, and that's considering Suicide Squad. Jared Leto is the worst Joker we've ever had, and I thought, and I defended him when I saw Suicide Squad, and I said, no, he was just given the wrong version of the character, the stupid tattoos. Jared Leto is a fine actor. I'm sure he's doing a good job. But apparently just changing your voice is all they think it needs to be the Joker. Fuck off. Fuck off, you lazy, uninspired piece of shit. That's a terrible interpretation of that character, top to bottom. I didn't mind the play.
Awful. Every line he spoke, I wanted to cry.
I thought there was the stuff about, teasing him about Dick Grayson and stuff. I enjoyed, but fundamentally, that whole scene, I was like, pointless. This just feels like a cock tease. It feels like you're drunk on power and just I'm going to do this. And
drunk on power. That is exactly that's what this should have been called. Justice League, the drunk on power cut.
Well, no, I think the rest of it, honestly, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. I'd recommend it. I think it's a lot better. But that scene just felt like, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed that scene, but I just felt like, why is this here? Because you're not going to pay this off. So wouldn't you rather it was a complete actual representation of what you were going to do with this movie? Because I don't really know why I understand the impulse, but I didn't think the point was about if you want more, then great, go for it, and I wouldn't mind this. But you've come out and said, this is in Zack Snyder, you're not going to do any more, and DC aren't. It feels like a pitch. It feels like a contradiction to some other stuff he's done. And like I say, there's some interesting ideas in there, but it is just that This Is Us thing of how do these pieces fall this way. But he's even then talked about what he's specified. It would, in fact, I've got it here. So basically, in a nutshell, the elevator pitch for the next two movies would have been Darkseid comes to Earth, Superman succumbs to the anti-life equation, which is the thing that allows Darkseid to control the universe. Superman joins him in his sorrow over the death of Lois, and the Earth falls. And then in the post-apocalyptic world, Batman and Flash run back in time to save Lois Lane, and therefore Superman does not succumb. And at the very end, there's a giant sort of redo of the sort of history lesson battle that we saw with the armies of men, the Atlanteans and the Themyscians. I don't know what that means. All joined the Green Lantern Corps. Themyscians, a few of the other Justice League to finally defeat Darkseid once and for all. So it would have been this ridiculously gigantic third movie. Great, but you've told us that pitch. You've put that out into the world, so you now can't make it. So I don't know what that like. But even is it a pitch? Is it a I just. But even or is it if it? You're gone.
No, go on. You're building.
Even if it had been a separate. This had been Zack Snyder's Justice League, and then in addition to that, in a month's time or whatever, HBO went, this is what Zack was thinking, this is a little short of what could have come next ultimately. But separate it. I don't know how I feel about it being tacked onto this and reshot specifically for this. Because the Drunk on Power thing, it feels like, and I'm sure it wasn't this, but it's hard not to feel that it's not him going, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to make people compliment Jared Leto. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. I'm going to have people... I'm going to have scene, but it hasn't. Loads of people love it. That scene, loads of people love it and love them and the dynamic between the two of them.
People with sucker punch avatars that keep insisting that we don't get the symbolism.
But yeah,
I think it's worse than that though, Chris. I actually think it's worse than what you described, because I agree that's egregious. Adding a cock tease for a thing you're never going to get to do that was never going to be part of your original movie is one thing, but it also it sticks out as part of the structure of this movie. It doesn't add anything to what we already know from the text of the original intended movie. We get the potential flash of where this is going for the old, for that nightmare flash forward Bruce had in Batman vs Superman, because you have Cyborg has that flash in the middle of the movie that does this better. This doesn't need to exist. It doesn't tell us anything new other than some weird, tiny bullshit details about that Harley Quinn's dead now, or whatever. That's completely...
And that Ezra Miller can't really grow a beard. That's the other thing I learned. It just looked a bit odd.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Not criticising the man. I just think, it felt like, one of them needs a beard. Give it to Ezra Miller.
Because time has passed. All right. So we'll take the most baby-faced. We'll take budget Tom Holland, and we'll give him a beard. I think that scene is so much more egregious than even you've given it credit for. I think it is so utterly at odds with the structure of the movie otherwise. As a structure, the unnecessary length and need for Zack Snyder to stop being drunk on his own power and actually fucking make some cuts, because that's the other thing that pisses me off is he said himself when he posted the pictures of the canisters when the movie was finished shooting and there was an assembly edit and it was 4 hours. He said it's an assembly edit, don't get too excited, 4 hours is absurd, it's not going to be 4 hours. He was going to bring it down to 3, I guess, or something in that region even then. So I think even putting aside the egregious nature of his approach here in terms of just even before the actual climax of the movie, the fight with Steppenwolf and everyone smiling on a mountaintop, that stuff all needs to be massively edited anyway to bring it down. But then to throw this fucking extra bullshit at the end on top of having not done that from the structure of the movie, it does feel like the movie ends and then there's some bonus scenes or deleted scenes or something. I felt like I was watching an old Blu-ray and they were like, here's some stuff we could have done. And I was like...
I honestly, personally, would have got rid of most of, even... I tell you what, if it'd been me, end on either Superman or Bruce Wayne and Wonder Woman and Alfred in Wayne Manor saying it's going to have 6 chairs. I'd get rid of the Joker on the boat, and then for me the post credits would have been the notion that Lex Luthor had escaped. I thought the Lex Luthor escape scene was brilliant, and then slightly he's just kind of the same, because you kind of got the bald head and you saw him at the end of Batman v Superman and you think he's this different, changed Lex Luthor who's escaped to the world. Oh no, he's on the boat giving the same performance he gave in Batman v Superman. Okay. So yeah, personally, I'd have got rid of all the extra.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think the movie flows reasonably well to a climax with the, again, I keep making this point, but I just want to clarify. Obviously, all of that still needs to be trimmed massively anyway. But from the start of the movie to the defeat of Steppenwolf and the 6 chairs things, but room for more, everything between those 2 points with the exception of the Martian Manhunter shot, which I would just cut. I would have the scene with Lois and Martha, but just leave it as a nice, sweet scene between Lois and Martha. I think that's all it needed to be. You cut the Martian Manhunter shot, and then you basically, as you just said, you cut everything else, and maybe your post-credits is you're at Arkham Asylum, and they're like, come on, Luthor, and it's not Luthor, and Luthor's escaped, and he's on a boat sipping his drink. You don't even need the fucking rest of that scene. You know, you don't need it's Bruce Wayne stuff. You don't need any of that. Cut all the rest. And that would be what, 3.5 hours maybe, 3 hours 35, and that would automatically be a lot better. And then I reckon there's easily 30 minutes of chuffer, just fucking barking dogs and women singing as Aquaman slowly walks into the water that you could trim. Respect my time a little bit more. That would be nice. Because again, it's the Zack Snyder Drunk on Power edition of Justice League, and I just want to reassert, this is not the movie you would have seen in cinemas at the time.
No, it isn't. It isn't, and yeah.
It's also not the second coming of cinema. So I think fundamentally, like, there are a lot of insane additions that add nothing to this in terms of the Martian Manhunter stuff. But even if you take that stuff out, it's still bloated. It's still very inefficient, I think. For a movie that's as long as it is, it doesn't do anything that complex with its characters. I don't understand why Zack Snyder is incapable of, doing something that's complex and nuanced and actually studies the characters. All this surface level stuff that he just stretches out and mistakes for nuance baffles me. It's definitely not the mess that Batman vs Superman was. It's better than that. But I thought the theatrical cut of this movie was better than Batman vs Superman, because I really hated Batman vs Superman, and I at least thought there were some good ideas in the theatrical cut of this movie that are definitely explored more here. The only thing I think I actually kind of missed from the Whedon stuff, and it's one thing, might just be the save just one person thing, because I actually think that's a better use of the Flash than what he gets in this movie.
I think it's the one area where you could tie it in more if you got rid of Iris West, because that's him saving her, so that would underplay.
Well, because he says in that scene, again, I watched it. He says, "I save people, but I usually just sort of zip in and push stuff over and zip out. And here I have to fight someone." He's more talking about combat in that scene where he's scared, and Batman's just like, "Yeah, I get it. You're scared. There's baddies here that could potentially hurt us. Just save one person." And he's like, "And then what do I do?" He's like, "You'll know," and it saves someone else. And I think they could have had that could have stayed. Although I understand Zack not wanting to put any footage shot by Whedon in this, so I'm not surprised it's gone. But it's a shame, because it is probably the best edition Whedon made, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I think it would have added to the incredible Flash running and reversing time at the end. I think that scene would have added to that.
That's kind of what hurts, because if in the Whedon cut they'd have kept the same premise for the ending, because the ending, the actual stakes are very clear, and the goals of each member of the Justice League and to make this work and to save everything are made very clear, and you do get quite invested in that.
Yeah, it's the best bit, I think. I honestly, I think the ending, for me personally, I loved the ending. Mm-hmm. That final climatic battle, I thought was phenomenal.
I agree. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you, Chris. That everything about that works for me. I like the action. I like the visuals. I love the setup of what they're doing, because it's not just stop a skybeam. It's like a really clear. It's not just fight the villain, as it was in Thingy's cut. It's, you need to be here. You need to be able to do this. I'm going to defend you so you can achieve this goal. We've all got a thing to do. The other two, we're going to distract Steppenwolf so this can be possible. So they keep doing things like, so Cyborg keeps going to the thing, and then Steppenwolf keeps pulling him back. And you're like, no, you just need to reach the thing. And then when you know what you need lining up, you need Cyborg at the mother boxes with the Flash going at full speed. And when you think they're there and they're going to achieve it, and Flash gets shot, mate, there's tension. It's brilliant. I'm as much as I said at the beginning, this isn't a better movie. The ending is definitely better. This climax is so infinitely better. I can't even. It's frustrating that Whedon changed it, because, as you've just pointed out, it actually lends in to what he's setting up with the Flash in the just save one more thing, or just save one thing, because
that's the real bit for me. I had a lot of I enjoyed it all, and actually, I personally didn't necessarily feel its length, although I did, through force of circumstance, have to watch it broken up, and would like to watch it all in one to see how I feel then. But throughout a lot of the beginning, it was like, this is better because it's more. Like the Amazons thing was a great example for me. In fact, the Amazon sequence,
for the action sequences, that is definitely true.
Yeah, I watched, loved it, and then rewatched the scene from Justice League and was like, oh, there's more of this in there than I remember there being. But things like the building falling, loved it. Thought that was great. But I was very much like, better because it's more, and I understand if you have to go from 4 hours to 2, why a lot of it was cut. That battle at the end was where I was like, oh fuck, they should have fought to keep this shit in because it's awesome. And I felt the loss of the Flash stuff, the Cyborg stuff, and the Cyborg stuff throughout the movie. I felt the loss of as well, as everyone has been sort of universally agreed on.
Yeah.
I completely agree. The end, it was just like, oh shit. And so in terms of like overall thoughts, I think I'm more positive than you. I thought it was a lot better. I love the character stuff. I love what they did. I think it's better? Yes. Do I think it's necessarily fair to compare the two and say that this would have been a better movie released at the time? No, because this isn't the movie that would have been released at the time, as you said. That's something I felt very strongly watching it and in the lead up to it. I think the stuff at the end is amazing. But I do think there's stuff where I'm like, you can trim here, you can trim Aquaman, you can trim some of the shots, and you can definitely trim the nightmare sequence and a lot of the end, which I'm not really sure of its purpose in this as a thing. But I'm thrilled that he got the chance to just go for, like, fair play to him, like, for just being like, well, fuck it. Here it is, people. Like, fair play to him. Fair play to the fans that always said, it existed. I mean, they had to spend $70 million to get to this. So, but fair. And, I'll hold my hands up. I was one of the people going, we're never going to see it. It doesn't exist how you think it is. There's probably not even that much footage there. There was, because we've seen it. And, congratulations, fair play. And I'm really pleased for Zack. And there is definitely stuff in here that if he'd have not suffered horrific tragedies, and there's little, I loved the For Autumn thing at the end. I thought that was very touching.
There was another one in the middle. I don't know if you noticed. Now I don't know if it's different.
The You Are Not Alone.
Yeah, the
poster.
billboard, right?
Yeah.
With what I assume was I assume a phone number that was attached to that was a suicide prevention hotline of some description. I assume.
Yeah, so it's worth because I've actually got a thing with it here. After Bruce drives off with Barry Allen, the camera focuses for a moment on a poster for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Fans backing the Snyder Cut have raised over £500,000 for the foundation. The organisation has become an important one to the Snyders after the death of their daughter. Not only is this poster a call to action, but it is a nice nod and acknowledgement of the fans who helped make this version of the movie a reality. That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. And I think if a 3-hour version of this had come out at the time, it would have been praised more because of things like how they handled Cyborg and the Flash in that last battle, which is unique and brilliant. But I don't think you need Joker talking about giving Batman a reach around.
I'm less positive, I guess. I think there is a better movie in there. So I think fans were right to suggest that. When they were saying the Snyder Cut would end up being better than... And I laughed because I was like, I don't know. I mean, I saw Batman vs. Superman. It was a mess. I'll tell you right now, this is better than Batman vs. Superman by some fucking way. Batman vs. Superman is an absolute incoherent mess of a movie, top to bottom. It's one of my worst cinema-going experiences, full stop. But with that said, he needed some oversight here, I think, like he would have had originally. Someone to say, I know you're sort of doing this for the fans, but you also need to make a movie with human pacing, because I don't understand how it's acceptable for the first hour of this movie to go by and me to feel like you've achieved very little. Like, I really don't understand why the first hour or two of this movie takes so long to set up everything when it doesn't even give me character depth that you want. 2 hours is the length of a normal movie, and it doesn't even scratch the surface of introducing these fucking characters. And when it does it in the most shallow possible way. That is infuriating. So I think this movie is equally flawed. I don't think it's better. I think there is a better movie in there, so fans were right, but this isn't it, in my opinion.
I think it would have proved the point more as well, because, you know, from the fans' perspective, it means you wouldn't have knobheads like us going, well, it's not necessarily better because it's not what would have been released. So if it had been, you know, a 3-hour cut, if it had been the length of a cut that could have been released, if it had no additional reshoot footage, just, you know, graphic stuff, then I think, you know, it would have been indisputable. There would be no and at the moment, but of this 4-hour movie with additional stuff that got filmed in the last few years wouldn't have been released at the time. There's a but now, and I think it proves more of a point if it's the original thing. But hey, maybe it wasn't about proving a point. Maybe for Zack Snyder, it was just about getting something that he loved out there. And if it was, fair play. That's his right, and congrats for doing it.
Yeah, and I'm with you on I will say I'm very much with you on that. I'm glad this exists. I'm happy for the fans. I'm not one of those people that's going to tell you that if you enjoyed this film, you're crazy or wrong. Like, you know, I respect that this exists, and I respect that the fans made this happen. And I hope this is what they wanted. I hope this is exactly the movie they were hoping for, and I hope they're all thrilled. There'd be nothing worse than for them to have gone to all this effort and all this excitement only to be disappointed. So I was relieved when I saw initial feedback on Twitter and stuff from fans being positive, because I cannot imagine how much that would have hurt if this movie had absolutely sucked, like top to bottom, like if it had been a mess of some sort. That they didn't even like. That would have been heartbreaking. I can't express how much I wouldn't have wanted that to happen. I personally still have a lot of issues with the film. A lot of pointless scenes, so many scenes that go nowhere. I'm scratching my head still. So yeah, I wish he'd had a little bit more. And I've said this about several very, very prominent filmmakers over the years, that they no longer have somebody to say no, and therefore they get fucking self-indulgent. I think that's true of Quentin Tarantino movies. I certainly think that's true of Scorsese movies. He needs somebody in the editing room to say no and rein them in when they are being self-indulgent or making stuff go on longer than it needs to. There are so many scenes in this movie that make the exact same point as other scenes. So again, you end up just scratching the surface level. And I don't mind just scratching the surface level if you're not going to take too much time on it. But to spend that much time on something and still not actually explore it properly, that's embarrassing. So I think, again, I do think there is a good movie in here. This isn't it for me. But I'm so thrilled it happened. Getting to see those action sequences, which I do think being indulgent helped with. I think letting him be indulgent with those action scenes just proves he's still. I mean, I remember seeing 300 in IMAX years ago when it came out, and like being so impressed with the way he told stories through action, and there was definitely shades of that here. And a tighter cut would have been necessary, would have been like nice, but I mean, it's hard to deny that the fans were right in that there is a better movie out there.
Well, just getting rid of the Flash awkwardly falling on Wonder Woman alone.
When I wrote down about that, I said the just save one scene is gone, but so is the Flash landing on Wonder Woman. So swings and roundabouts. I wrote that in my notes.
Yeah.
I'd tell you what I am a little surprised with though. The broy Aquaman stuff is still there. That surprised me.
Yeah, but it felt like
my man.
Less though.
My man.
I love my man though.
No.
I love my man.
I dress like a bat. I dig it. Like, okay, cool. I guess. Like, I don't know. I was hoping that.
In there?
I was hoping. Yeah, it is. I wrote it down that it's still in there, so it must be. For me, Well, that's the other thing as well is that. Oh, sorry, no. Maybe the one near Commissioner Gordon is cut, but the dress like a bat scene at the top is still there, which also has that insane flaw that he's like Bruce Wayne dressed like a bat, and there's all these fucking people around. Like that's still in there, like still full of that insane sort of nonsense that we'd already accepted from the previous cut. Like, why would he just out Bruce Wayne in front of all those people? I don't understand. But yeah, I don't know. It's it's a mess, isn't it? Really,
That's a. Huh?
I should have let you wrap up first because you did it more coherently. I've Snydered my own conclusion. Is what I've done.
Yeah, you're criticizing Snyder, Dan. Where's your restraint?
None. I'm just rambling around. That's the point. I'm glad it exists. Though. Happy. I'll never watch it. I'll never watch it again.
Pardon, sorry?
I'll never watch it again, but
I'm going to watch it again. Yeah, I found it, especially the climax. I found it exciting enough, and it made me smile enough to definitely watch it again. And I want to experience it as a 4 hour sitting as well.
How did you separate it? Because I had to separate it with a nap, because I had a headache. But did you watch like half one night, half the next night? Like 2 movies almost?
Yeah, I had to. It was throughout a day, but broken up, or maybe a day and a half. But not through. To clarify, not through choice. That was circumstance. I wanted to, but we've had. There was a lot of content that Dan and I had to fit in this week, including this. So yeah, it was through circumstance, not through desire, because I think the best way to view it and judge it would have been all as one. So I definitely want to do that. Potentially even I'd watch it this weekend, to be honest, if Jess was particularly up for it. So yeah, that is our Snyder Cut style review of the Snyder Cut.
Mm-hmm. And now we should add a bunch of endings to our ending to really make it like the Snyder Cut. Stuff that didn't need to be part of the review.
Tad and I had a conversation about being tighter with time this week. An hour and 15 down. But that's good. I feel that was an impassioned discussion. I'm very glad. I worry, but I suppose you got to hope that people stick with it, because I think it was way more balanced than it looked like it was going to be at the beginning. We always need a caveat, like, God, if you love the Snyder Cut, don't click off in 3 minutes, because we do. It is complimented after Dan's initial anger.
Yeah, I'm still angry. I'm still angry that nobody seems to respect my time at all. Just a few snips, just anywhere, please. I don't want to watch a dog bark.
Yeah, we didn't need the dog. We didn't need the slow-mo Aquaman going into the waves.
Oh, Jesus.
Anyway.
So much of that.
I'm not entirely sure we needed Wonder Woman discovering it by finding a cave, going and looking at pictures on the wall.
Couldn't she have just known about the backstory?
Yeah, I think that's a cut. That's a cut I'd make personally. Like, I'd have her just.
This is what I'm saying about scenes that like don't add anything, like in terms of like other than just like they're there. Like so many scenes, especially in the opening, in the first act. The first act is really where I would make other than the obviously what we've already talked about, the end stuff. That, you know, that sort of like 20-30 minutes of like nightmare scene with the Joker, Martian Manhunter. Other than that stuff, which we've already talked about, the other place I would mainly make the cuts is the opening act, where it spends a lot of time setting up ideas that aren't that complicated and don't need that much time dedicated to repeating the information. You know what I mean? Such as Wonder Woman discovering it and then explaining it in a really long flashback sequence.
Yeah, it helps her feel more separate to the Amazons, and I think actually this film, the notion of a Wonder Woman going back to see the Amazons is kind of, you know, hinted at here, and I think that would have been interesting. But I don't think, again, if we're taking 4 hours down to 2.5, 3, that's an example of a scene I think that could go
easily. Yeah.
Anyway,
so there we go, and there's our extra ending.
Yeah, there you go.
That's our version of the nightmare scene. Right, let's move on, Chris. Please, God, let's move on.